HPE wakes up for Morpheus, the buzz around CloudBees, Kioxia gets Broadband, DigiCert is moving into DNS, WD speeds up your AI, your data got leaked again, and we take a closer look at this big AMD deal in this week's episode of the Gestalt IT Rundown. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rundown. It is August the 21st. We're still in the dog days of summer, but don't worry, it's National Spumoni Day. I don't know what that is, but Steven obviously does because he's been singing about it the entire green room. So, my co-host, Mr. Stephen Foskett, what do you like your spumoni with?
You don't know what spumoni is, Tom?
No, I don't.
Oh, well, okay. So spumoni is when you can't figure out which kind of ice cream you actually want, and yet you don't just want like vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry or something boring like that. No. You want cherry, pistachio, and chocolate, or if you're a weirdo, cherry, pistachio, and vanilla, all in one. Now, you might say it's really gross to mix together those three kinds of ice cream, but you'd be wrong, or maybe not of Italian ancestry like me. My grandmother from Italy, would have not tolerated me like not liking spumoni. So go down in New Haven, have yourself a pizza and a dish of spumoni, and on Worcester Street, and celebrate National Spumoni Day. Well, and if you don't know what any of this means, just Google it. I mean, that's what the Google is for.
The good news is that while spumoni is a big mix of ice creams, the Rundown is a big mix of news stories because we had a really busy week of some tech news. I want to kick it off with probably one of the biggest acquisitions that we've seen in quite a while. HPE has decided to make their Morpheus partnership permanent. Last week, they announced their intent to acquire the cloud management platform company that has been an integral part of HPE GreenLake for the past couple of years. Morpheus has also helped companies like Dell, Lenovo, and several others manage their private cloud platforms over the years and will continue to do so, according to reports. Details of the transaction were not disclosed because I'm sure it fell under some kind of reporting threshold. But with the cloud market expected to triple in the next few years, especially the hybrid cloud market, was this a good move by HPE?
Oh, heck yeah. I think this move is going to punch way above its weight. I talked about this yesterday on Tech Strong Gang as well with Stephen Dickens, who follows the company really closely. And I urge you to check that out too. But here's the summary. We've been following Morpheus for a long time. This is a company that basically came out of the DevOps space in a very practical way. The Morpheus team was trying to figure out how to handle hybrid cloud, hybrid multi-cloud, and they realized that what developers really want is a consistent platform that allows you to work with basically any hardware platform anywhere and makes things easy, because that's really one of the challenges when it comes to multi-cloud. If you've got a bunch of different hyperscalers, maybe you've got some OpenShift, maybe you've got some on-prem, maybe you've got some, something else, and you're trying to deploy applications, what a freaking nightmare that is. Well, Morpheus has been focused from the very, very start on solving that problem, basically making it not a nightmare to use hybrid cloud. And they, as I said, have punched way above their weight. This is a startup, a little startup that has basically most of the largest companies as customers, or at least many of the largest companies as customers. This is a little startup that has become integral to, as you said, some of the biggest heavy-hitting products in the space, including HPE GreenLake. And of course, this is a team that came out of HPE with a lot of knowledge of what it makes HPE customers happy. So I was really not shocked to see HPE buy this. I gotta say, I hope that Morpheus got some really solid money, because basically they have built an incredible component here. Now, GreenLake is doing really well. HPE has a solid hit on their hands. Let's call it an easy walk-in double. They've built a good product there in the space. Morpheus makes a lot of that happen in a way that you wouldn't expect from a little software company. And frankly, the combination just makes a ton of sense. So I'm very, very excited to see this. It shows that HPE is serious about next generation application deployment, about the reality of hybrid multi-cloud. And it gives HPE, frankly, a seat at the table when it comes to talking about cloud applications and hyperscalers. So I think this is a great product. I think it's a great buy. And, it couldn't have happened to a nicer group of people as well. CloudBees has picked up Launchable, a testing automation platform. Launchable uses machine learning and AI to streamline the testing process, such as determining if failure will happen and halting the tests when an alert happens rather than running needless tests. CloudBees is looking to incorporate these automation workflows into their DevSecOps solution to help automatically test new updates and reduce hours spent troubleshooting bugs. Sounds pretty useful, Tom.
It does sound useful to me. And the reason for that is share a little personal history here. When I was taking the CCIE lab exam, not one of the successful ones, by the way, I failed early on in the exam, probably about an hour and a half in. I just didn't answer enough questions in a certain section. From that point forward, I knew that no matter what I did, I wasn't going to pass this exam. Now, in my case, I was stubborn and decided to stick around, and I did better than I thought. But when you're developing software, do you really want to run 4 more hours of tests only to know that this code isn't going to pass whatever module failed in the beginning? I don't want to wait around for 4 or 5 hours to know that I could have been working on a bug. And that to me is the real value of Launchable, is these AI unit tests that you can have automatically run and throw alerts. And just, if you've ever done like step debugging, like you're going to stop as soon as you see the bug because you've got to solve this one before you can move on to the next one, because you never know if this one is the one that's causing more problems down the road. And so by being able to do this, you're actually reducing the amount of time that it takes to do the work. Yeah, I know. People are going to be like, but if I have to stop on every little thing, but that's good because that means you're going to hit the show-stopping bugs before they go into production. And that's something that we've seen a lot of recently with agile development methodology, with CI/CD pipelines. A lot of times things can get out of the barn before you know it. And my favorite thing, especially as a security person, is this incidents where code check-ins have come back up. So like, we fixed this bug 2 years ago, but for some reason we got off on the wrong code train at some point, or we integrated some piece back in that shouldn't have been there, or that we were trying to get working and we actually reintroduced the bug. This is the kind of solution that will automatically desk check your code and go, hey, wait a minute, you've got a problem over here that we fixed earlier and you need to apply this patch or you need to change this line. And that happens automatically. So that means that your developers are spending less and less time actually troubleshooting the code. And that is huge for DevSecOps, right? Because if you're trying to roll these production releases as quickly as possible to keep people up to date and secure, as we'll talk about later why it's important to be secure, I think that this is hugely valuable. And if this is something that CloudBees thinks that they can sell to their DevSecOps people, more power to them, because that means they're going to get paid really well. Kioxia has unveiled a new prototype SSD with a flexible optical interface that promises reduced power consumption and increased flexibility for data center designs. This optical link allows greater distances between compute and storage devices. Currently supports up to a 40-meter run, with plans to extend this all the way up to 100 meters. Kioxia claims that this enhances energy efficiency and allows for more scalable, disaggregated computing systems. Now, Stephen, I am no storage expert, but I got to wonder, why are you trying to move the SSD that far away from the server?
Hey, don't blame me, man. I didn't do this. No. Kioxia is showing something cool. I'm a nerd. I'm a storage nerd. Of course, I'm going to nerd out about storage. So at FMS conference last week, Kioxia this was one of the many interesting things that were being shown. This is not a product. This is not something that you're going to go out and buy. And frankly, it may never come to market as it stands. But the idea is kind of interesting, especially when you mix in the fact that storage is almost universally PCI Express based now. And you think about CXL, which is also PCI Express based. And you think about next generation PCIe, Gen 5, 6, 7, 8, et cetera, which are increasingly looking at optical interconnects. essentially what Kioxia is showing is that they can do that they can have longer distances between server and storage. And a lot of this comes down to that same question that we had when we were talking about CXL on our Utilizing Tech podcast. Essentially, what is a server anymore? And when you look at where PCIe and CXL are going, what the promise is to sort of blow up that conventional unitary server that we've been dealing with for all this time, and allow it to become more rack scale and maybe even inter rack scale. And this is showing that that's absolutely possible, absolutely practical to do with high throughput, low latency, high bandwidth connections like SSD to server. You can have that go out over fiber optic cable. You can, have it go, 40 meters. You're not going to really have a SSD 40 meters away from the server. But when it comes to going from the server up to the top, across, down, it's useful to have some serious distance in there. And it shows that all of this is practical. So along with a lot of the announcements that we've been seeing lately from CXL 2.0 and even 3.0 devices that are being planned and brought to market, having greater distance for PCI Express signals, having greater distance from SSDs, all of this points to a future when we can have a different kind of server. And to me, that's what I'm looking for. Right now, fundamentally, servers are very limited in what you can pack into that box, simply because you've got to have drives across the front, you've got to have power supplies in the back, you've got to have memory, you've got to have CPUs. Basically, all of these constraints make servers very much kind of what they are and what they're capable of being. But if you can pull those constraints away with technologies like PCIe and CXL and optical cabling, then you can have a very different kind of server. And so you could theoretically have a server where all of the SSDs are maybe in a rack at the bottom with special cooling, and they're connected via optical to a rack of CPUs that's connected via CXL to a rack of memory, et cetera. It makes it much more flexible. It makes it potentially much more powerful. And it shows that there's a future in the sort of nuts and bolts stuff that geeks like me like to get excited about, the shape and form of the server. So very cool to see companies talking about prototypes like this. And frankly, maybe the future is optical. Security firm DigiCert has expanded their offerings in the realm of DNS and DDoS security by announcing the acquisition of Vercara. The company is the one behind Ultra DNS, an enterprise-grade managed DNS service that provides service as well as security from DNS hijacking. Ultra DNS prevents attackers from using similar DNS names to inject malware, as well as offering protection against the latest DDoS attacks and other attacks that use DNS redirects. The goal is to use these new DNS security capabilities for more complete authoritative attribution of domain names. Now, for more on this story, let's turn it over to our own Futurum Group research director, Bob Suter, to tell us a little bit more about DigiCert.
All right, thanks, guys. Well, this is a story of acquisition of a security company by another security company. They're both very well established. We're talking about DigiCert and Vercara. DigiCert was founded in 2003 and Vercara in the late 1990s. This is one of these acquisitions that you look at, and sometimes you look for subtle movements, like why did they do that and so forth. This one's pretty obvious. Their portfolios for security are very complementary with almost no overlap. First of all, DigiCert is the company that is acquiring Vercara. They are known for their PKI infrastructure, public key infrastructure. They help manage the security for websites and servers. They even have scanning tools for software. It could be open source software. It could be anything else to look for malicious code or code that really shouldn't be there. And even for IoT devices and chips, some way of saying this chip really is from the people who they say it's from. On the other hand, Vercara is really all about user access. So when you go in your browser and you type a domain name and you expect to show up that website, what's your guarantee that you're really going to that website? What about the speed? What about the performance? So Vercara offers all these sorts of tools for authenticated DNS, domain name services, uh, protected in different ways. They help prevent denial of service attacks. And that's when you have a lot of computers that have been infected by malware and they all attack a website. It could be a podcast, a webcast, anything like this. And it really slows down the performance. Maybe you can't even get to the website at all. Web application API security. As we all know, the web, the internet isn't just used for web pages. There's an awful lot of commerce, an awful lot of transactions. There's data movement going back and forth. These are accessed via APIs, application programming interfaces. Vercara provides the security over those and helps you inventory them. And they also provide a firewall. So really, in total, this acquisition makes a tremendous amount of sense. These are two companies that are owned by private equity. They'll continue to be owned by private equity. And they're putting together a really impressive portfolio. It's making DigiCert a one-stop shop for most of your security needs. So it's a great move, I think, by DigiCert. Back to you guys.
Thanks for that, Bob. Western Digital has a new entrant in the lucrative market of powering hungry AI systems. The OpenFlex Data 24 is a 24-drive NVMe SSD enclosure and supposed NVMe over Fabric RDMA access through Rocky. If you don't know what any of that means, then go ask your NVIDIA cluster manager, because that really is music to their ears. Per benchmarks supplied by Western Digital, the OpenFlex can read 54.56 gigabits per second and write 52.6 gigabits per second, which is atypical of systems having a so closely matched read and write speed. The solution has been promoted as a competitor to NetApp's ONTAP and BGFS arrays. Stephen, when we come to AI systems that are hungry for this much storage and performance, is Western Digital's array going to be one that a lot of people are going to want to take a look at?
Well, it's interesting because companies like Western Digital and Seagate that make the physical drives have, for the longest time, been involved also in making essentially easy storage arrays. This is a tried and tested market for these companies. And it can look on the face of it like this is a big competition with the OEMs that are using their drives in their own storage arrays. But frankly, I don't think that that's what this is. I think that Western Digital is essentially, I mean, you could think of this as being analogous to an SSD. I've often said that an SSD is actually a really small storage array. Well, this is just a really big, really small storage array. Essentially, Western Digital has put together a really nice, high performance, 24 drive enclosure to support AI workloads. And this is not intended to be a competitor, in my mind, for the mainstream storage arrays that companies like NetApp and Pure are selling, or the scalable things that you see from a VAST or a Weka. Instead, this is Western Digital putting together a product that is useful as sort of a component, a base level component in an AI stack rack scale architecture. And so if you look at it that way, it makes a lot of sense. Essentially, if you're building some kind of ultra high performance application, and AI is it right now, and you need high performance, high bandwidth, then you can just plug in one of these Western Digital devices and get GPU direct storage from it. If you're building a more flexible, scalable storage component as part of a bigger product, a bigger solution that supports other applications, well, then you're probably not going to be buying this. You're probably going to be looking to a company like NetApp or Pure that sells a really well-integrated, high-feature, high-function storage array. So to me, this makes a lot of sense that they would offer this. I think that there's definitely market demand to have a box to serve GPU direct data to GPU clusters. And it also makes a lot of sense to have it come from a company like Western Digital rather than a company like NetApp. So no, I don't see this as like a competing thing. I see this as sort of a something the market demanded, and Western Digital is meeting that market demand with a high performance big SSD. Now, you might have heard that everyone's social security number was hacked. And now we're on to the next big one. In fact, this is a really big one. National Public Data is a data broker that does background checks on potential employees. They aggregate public data and sell access to that data. Someone was able to get into the NPD database and is having a lot of fun matching it all up. But the worst part of this comes as a sister site to NPD database called recordcheck.net, which was found to have a compressed file that included the site source code, including plain text passwords for the users, including the founder and administrators. Once notified by Internet Batman Brian Krebs, the admins took down the file and announced plans to retire their site. But maybe they should retire themselves, because this is absolutely facepalm of all facepalms. They leaked the data and the password on their website?
Yeah, I don't even know what to say anymore. Here's the thing. A lot of people don't understand this whole kind of data hygiene thing that a lot of really adept security researchers have. It's not just that I don't want my data in certain places. It's that companies like NPD can aggregate that publicly accessible data and store it somewhere. Like my social security number by itself is worthless, right? There was a GitHub that somebody linked me to that was hilarious. It was every social security number hacked. And it was literally just a list of, 9-digit numbers, sequential. That doesn't matter. But as soon as you put my social security number with my name and my address, now you've got critical data. So if those three things appear in different places, and a broker like NPD puts them together, that's problematic. Oh, but you say, NPD doesn't do that just willy-nilly. They protect them by putting all the passwords in a zip file, which is a format that we have thoroughly deconstructed and are totally capable of getting into. And if you don't believe that there are not bots out there that crawl your website and download every available file that there is to download and store them for future use just in case, I don't know what to tell you. And yes, I will thoroughly. I love Brian Krebs. He's the internet superhero that we deserve, because he literally did. He figured out that there was a zip file out there. It had the founder's username and password in it in clear text. And so he called them. He goes, this is here, right? And then suddenly it just went and vanished into thin air. And then they're like, oh yeah, no, those are old passwords, and there's no way that those would still work, right? I'm going to tell you a little hint. If a company is storing their passwords in plain text anywhere, they don't have the infrastructure to immediately then go and invalidate all of the passwords of their users and force a password change with salted, hashed, stored values, which makes me wonder, where were they storing all this information? Like, was it stored in clear text as well? I bet you it probably was, because that makes it faster to search, and it makes the overhead on those searches a lot cheaper to maintain. And if you're a company that's running on razor thin margins already, are you going to invest more in technology to keep your users safe? I would say that having a plain text zip password username file says no. So yeah, this is one of those ones that's going to take a long time to impact. Like, listen, I am already up to free credit monitoring until my grandkids are old enough to retire. I don't need more. I need companies to do better. If you're going to collect data, you need to treat it like some kind of level 4 CDC quarantine virus. There should be no way for people to get into that data without so many protections that it's basically almost untenable. And that would be a beautiful thing for all of us out here, because if it's untenable to get into that data without all these massive protections, then the only people who will be getting into it are the ones who deserve to see it. All the rest of these fly-by-night organizations that are just buying access to it because it's dirt cheap will go somewhere else, and we'll all be a little bit safer because of that. We had a story that we needed to take a closer look at, because this is probably one of the biggest acquisitions that we're going to hear about all year. And it comes courtesy of our friends over at AMD. They're opening up the wallet to the tune of nearly $5 billion to buy ZT Systems. You may not have heard of them before, but AMD and ZT Systems have had a pre-existing partnership. They collaborated on the building the EPYC processor line. Now, that's not their biggest customer, though, because ZT's biggest customers were AWS and Azure. ZT Systems specializes in hyperscale AI systems that you buy in rack quantities. This move follows a very recent acquisition of Silo AI, which we did cover here on the rundown. And their last really big acquisition was, of course, Xilinx. There's a lot to unpack here. There's been a lot of discussion from the Futurum Group analysts, and there's a lot of buzz about this deal so far. But Stephen, I wanted to start off with you. What was it about ZT Systems that made them so attracted to AMD in the first place?
You know, it's interesting that I believe that this was probably a combination of strategic and opportunistic goals on the part of AMD management. So leading up to this acquisition, there was some news that Foxconn is going to be increasingly involved in NVIDIA's supply chain for their big rack scale AI systems. Now, you might know that part of the success that NVIDIA has had in the AI market is the fact that they have basically pre-integrated rack scale systems that comprise GPUs, CPUs, networking, et cetera. And those rack scale systems, you know, DGX and the like, make up I don't want to say the majority, but a lot of NVIDIA's sales and success in shipping GPUs. Now, AMD absolutely has a competitive product with NVIDIA in the AI GPU space. Their MI250X and MI300X are really, really excellent products. But they have seen, let's say, modest sales success because, frankly, the NVIDIA juggernaut is hard to derail. They have so many things that AMD didn't have. They have relationships. They've got this incredible software stack and allegiance to the CUDA platform from software developers. And of course, they also have this incredible integrated rack scale AI concept, which has really allowed allowed NVIDIA to extract maximum revenue and build maximum market share in this sort of AI supercomputer space. In fact, one of the things that's benefiting NVIDIA is that their rack scale systems specify the use of, for example, Mellanox switches, which is owned by NVIDIA, as well as, of course, their GPUs and their CPUs. So essentially, NVIDIA has built this tremendous business selling not GPUs, but entire systems, integrated systems. Now, if you were AMD and you wanted to break into that market because you said, you know, we've got a competitive GPU product, we have an absolutely excellent CPU product, we've got networking, IPUs and things like that. How do we break into this market? Well, there's a couple of things you need. One thing you need is you need to be able to kind of shake some people loose from the CUDA ecosystem. And to me, that's what the acquisition of Silo AI was all about. But the other thing you need is you need a competitor for DGX. You need a competitor for this rack scale market. And you need somebody who really, really deeply understands the needs of the customers that are out there buying literally billions of dollars of rack scale GPU clusters for AI. Well, one company in that space that has gone unsung is ZT Systems. Essentially, this company, which has been around for a long time, doing basically building servers and PCs and rack scale, they basically manufacture the stuff that we think of when we think of computer servers and computer hardware. And they manufacture these things, interestingly, in the US and Europe. And they have very, very good relationships to some of the largest buyers of systems in the market. The problem for ZT is that they are facing a lot of competition from Taiwan, from China, from companies like Foxconn and so on that are out there building systems for hyperscalers, building systems for OEMs. And Foxconn and NVIDIA are getting closer and closer together in terms of building these integrated AI systems. And that kind of leaves ZT out in the cold. So I suspect that what happened was the ZT management and the AMD management, who are very friendly with each other, they got together and they said, our expertise in building rack scale systems generally and AI systems specifically, our familiarity with AMD, that could be really useful to you. And I'm sure that AMD looked at it and said, yeah, that's great, but most of your revenue comes from literally manufacturing and selling integrated servers, which is what our customers do, and we don't really want to be in that market. What are we going to do here? Well, if the price is right, you can do some cool things. And so essentially, AMD is going to spend, $4.9 billion on this thing. But then they're immediately going to turn around and sell the manufacturing assets that make basically all of ZT's revenues. If you look at ZT's numbers, it's actually pretty likely that AMD may recoup some or maybe even all, or gosh, they might even make a profit reselling ZT's manufacturing capability to some other OEM or ODM. And there are lots of companies that would really benefit from having server and systems manufacturing in the US and Europe. I think there's going to be a long line of customers waiting to bid on that aspect of ZT. Meanwhile, AMD gets to walk off with 1,000 employees that are experts at designing and building rack scale infrastructure, designing and building basically competitors to NVIDIA's crown jewel, working with NVIDIA's biggest customers. And AMD is going to leverage that to compete with NVIDIA, just like they're going to leverage Silo AI to compete with CUDA, just like they're going to leverage their GPU assets to compete with NVIDIA's GPU assets, and their CPU assets, well, they're way out on the lead on that. So this really is a masterstroke if you look at it from that perspective.
Well, it's funny to me because the way you describe it, where, we're going to take what you do and we're going to sell those pieces off or in the whole, and we're going to keep the people that we know we can work with. That almost sounds like an acqui-hire. We've seen that a number of times here in the industry where we want your brain trust. We want the people who are doing the forward thinking things. We don't want the line workers. We don't want the folks who are just kind of out there putting things in boxes. And I can see where that value for AMD could be there, right? Like we're developing the solution, but I do absolutely agree with you that they don't want to compete against their partners, right? Like this is one of the things that we've seen from other companies in the space a lot is they think that they can get to a point where they can kind of eclipse what their partners are doing. And we saw that under Bob Swan's Intel, right? Intel's going to make boards, Intel's going to make servers, Intel's going to do all this stuff. And then companies kind of look around and go, well, if you're making the stuff that I'm making, why am I buying from you? I mean, other than I have to. So I think that AMD is doing it the right way. Like they're saying, we want to develop this. We basically want to become an NVIDIA competitor, but we need a shot in the arm to get there. We have good technology. We don't have the holistic view of how to do this. And this is actually one of the things that I recorded a podcast with a couple of our Tech Field Day delegates about here just recently, where we talked about this idea that the juggernaut behind things like InfiniBand and NVLink is not that they are superior technology. It's that when you buy a rack scale NVIDIA system, you're going to use them. You don't have a choice. You don't get to go out and say, well, I want to use these Ethernet switches with this CPU. And that is something that's crippling anybody who is a legitimate competitor to NVIDIA right now. I go back far enough that I remember things like, HP's Blade server installations and IBM's Blade Center, where it's IBM devices in an IBM rack and you buy it directly from them and you don't have any options. Like you get to pick how much storage it has. Like that's it. And some people just chafe at that idea. They're like, oh, well, no, I need to have complete and total control over my IT infrastructure. No, you don't. You want it to work. And if you don't believe that, go look at the cloud. The cloud is effectively what a rack scale architecture looks like at scale, right? Like I don't care what the server is. I'm going to go buy that. And that's what AMD is hoping for. but they can't do that if they have to ingest all of this manufacturing capability that, quite honestly, doesn't really like synergize with what they've got right now. So yeah, why not sell it off, recoup some of that investment? You're going to have to eat some salaries for these smart people, but let's be fair, they're going to pay for themselves. And you give them a head start, because what you don't have to deal with is technical debt. And I hate to simplify it that much for our audience at home, but a factory is the absolute epitome of technical debt. You can't upgrade those things very easily. And a lot of other people in the industry are finding that out real fast, is that if you have existing product lines that are tooled to do things in a certain way, that ship doesn't turn very fast. You've got to spend money to do that. And here, this looks like a steal, because let's be honest, $5 billion to a company like AMD is not that big of a deal. And you notice that because they didn't do this as a stock deal. They paid cash and took on a little debt to do this. I think that, like what you said, they're going to turn this around, make real quick money, and get these folks working on something that, quite honestly, is more valuable in the long run to a company like AMD.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, you mentioned technical debt, actual debt. You know, I mean, I'm not a financial analyst, but I know a little bit about the space. And I think a lot of us have to be realistic about the finances that are going on here. You know, a company like AMD has a PE ratio of, you know, I don't know, let's say 20 times, you know, revenue. And in other words, people look at the company and they're like, man, you know, yeah, your annual revenue is X, but I think you've got this long runway. I think you've got this incredibly bright future. I think you've got growth ahead of you. I'm going to give you 20 times that in terms of stock valuation for the company, because I believe in the trajectory. I believe where you're going. I believe in this. A company like ZT Systems that manufactures servers, their equivalent, which is not really a PE ratio, but if you look at it, kind of like what are these companies valued at, it's not even 1x. In other words, you know, an investor is going to look at a factory that makes servers, and they're going to say, well, you took in $10 billion last year. There's no saying you're going to take in $10 billion next year. You've got all this, you know, investment. You've got such a low margin on your products. I mean, you're making such very little profit. You know, I'll give you, I don't know, half of your annual revenue in order to buy the company. And that's exactly what AMD did here, is that they're essentially buying ZT Systems for about half of their projected annualized revenues. And it shows sort of the problem of manufacturing versus sort of that Silicon Valley software company kind of thing. There's no way that AMD wants to get into an incredibly low margin business like building and selling rack scale servers. They want access to NVIDIA style profit margins. And this theoretically is a very clever way to get that, because essentially they're going to walk in, they're going to buy this thing at half of annual revenue, they're going to sell this thing at half of annual revenue, and they're going to walk out with the value that they want. The interesting thing to me is kind of what this means for the overall space, because if you look at the companies, the numbers from the big companies that are selling NVIDIA-based AI supercomputers, I'm going to say, you'll realize that they're not actually making much money on those in terms of margin. In fact, they're basically making nothing. NVIDIA gets all the profit from those servers. AMD, if you look at the ODMs that are selling AMD-based servers, they're still making pretty healthy margins, which means that AMD is leaving money on the table from AMD's perspective. I'm sure from HPE or Dell or Supermicro or Lenovo or somebody, you're like, yes, thank you. That's not on the table. That's in my pocket. I think that AMD wants access to those kind of NVIDIA-style margins because they've got NVIDIA-style products. And I think that, again, that's what this is all about. This is about increasing margin. And let me tell you, if AMD can even have modest success selling against NVIDIA and Blackwell, AMD is going absolutely through the roof, not just in terms of Wall Street financial nonsense, but in terms of overall value and positioning in the industry. And acquisitions like this are going to get them there. This is absolutely, this is a grand slam home run in terms of what it means for NVIDIA or against NVIDIA for AMD. I really just, maybe AMD is still trailing in the game because NVIDIA has this incredible market share. But this is really, really going to rocket them forward.
Yeah, I agree. And when it comes to market share, the king of the mountain is going to be the one who has all of the toys. And I think that's where AMD wants to be, is they want to steal as much of that market share as they can, but they know that the path forward is to have a completely integrated solution. Speaking of integrated solutions, we're not just a bunch of talking heads when it comes to the news. We also help companies get the news out about what they're doing. And one of the ways that we do that is through the Tech Field Day event series. And we have a couple of events coming up that we wanted to let you know about. First one's happening in mid-September. Stephen, that's one of the ones that you're very excited about. Tell everyone a little bit more.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. AI Field Day 5 is coming. We've got some incredible companies. I just spent some time talking to Integrail, which is a very exciting up-and-coming company that's helping companies realize the promise of AI in a very practical way. We've got Elastic, which is absolutely a leader in vectorized search, and Fabrica, which is doing incredible things with communications and connectivity and building AI solutions. Arista is going to be there talking about how they're interconnecting these AI solutions, which goes back to the previous session. And we're going to make some more announcements real soon now. We expect to have, this is going to be a 3-day event. We expect to have a pile of really exciting companies there. Don't miss it. That's September 11th through 13th. We're also going to be back with an AI Data Infrastructure Field Day event in October. And the week after the AI Field Day in September 18th and 19th, we've got Edge Field Day. And there again, we're going to be announcing some very cool companies too. For you as well, Tom.
You're right. We're going to be partnering with our friends over at Nokia to announce some new products that they're wanting to talk about, some hot topics in this area of networking. It's going to be a great conversation. We're going to get some really close looks at the hardware. In fact, I was told that they're going to let us actually touch it, which anymore is kind of special. But we're also going to hear some of the insights from some industry leaders out there and some people who are really invested in what the future of networking looks like. So make sure you set your calendar for that, September the 24th. You can check techfieldday.com for all of the details, including who's going to be joining me on site to do more about that. And if you are someone who loves to watch the Gestalt IT Rundown every week, we appreciate you tuning in. Make sure that you follow us on YouTube and you check out gestaltit.com for the show notes and linked articles that we pull some of our information from. And don't forget to subscribe in your favorite podcast application. Leave us a rating and a review so that everybody kind of knows what we're all about and they can enjoy the fun and, I don't know, maybe get a bowl of spumoni while they're at it. We will be back next week with more great content. There's some big things happening, and I'm sure we'll have lots of news coming out of it. But until then, take care of yourself, enjoy some dessert, and call your grandmother because it's National Senior Citizens Day. Call your grandpa or your dad or your mom or your favorite senior citizen. Just call them and ask them some stories about the old days of back when Atari was still a thing. And we'll be back next week with more great news.